Welcome to another Q&A. This Q&A is, I'm actually answering, I think it's Garrett. Yeah, Garrett. So, pardon me, yeah. He wrote to me and he said, my TDS is at 14 parts per million, what do I do? And so there are several answers of what you can do. But the first one is you want to know if your resin is expired. Usually this happens when somebody has a single tank, right? Because they don't have the second tank. We put two tanks, so the second one will pick up when the first one's failing. But still, maybe he had two tanks and he let it go longer and longer and longer, and now the TDS is creeping up, and that's what happens. So when that's creeping up, the first thing to do is to slow down the flow rate and see if the TDS goes back down again, right? So then we know, okay, the charge on the DI bead resin beads is diminishing, so it's not able to grab so much, but it can still grab, right? So sometimes you can find if you turn the flow rate down, because it's all determined by the amount of charge on the beads and the contact time with the beads of the water going through. So if you slow down the water going through, the resin beads that are okay, have got a chance at getting hold of the minerals. But the second one, which is an interesting one, is to invert the tank. Basically shake the tank. So what happens is that DI resin systems, the beads are basically round, like spherical, and so when you fill up the DI tank and then you fill it up with water, you'll see that the level of the DI, actually, when you go to empty it, is lower than the level it was at the top. That's not because they've shrunk, it's just that they settled. The little circles, it's like, beehive.
So they don't expand or
they don't expand or contract,
okay.
They just settle, right? Mm. And the better they settle, the water has to find its way around. They're slightly porous as well, actually, so the water kind of goes into them. But if you disturb the tank, right, like this, and invert it a couple of times and rearrange the resin, sometimes that can work and help you.
It doesn't affect it that some of the minerals detach?
No,
okay.
That won't happen. Yeah.
Okay.
So the ionic charge is still there. And one of the things, I've done this before and had a disaster, right, because the top of my DI tank didn't have there's a mesh. Do you know that?
Yeah.
At the top, right, where the water goes out. There's a mesh. So if that mesh is missing,
then there's a lot of DI
beads. That happened to us even here, right? On one of our display days, we turn the water on, and then there's the fan of the jets, and then no water. Right? So every jet had got blocked by a DI resin bead.
That will not happen in the radial range, any brushes, because we have the little mesh filter in every brand.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
But that's a good mistake we can share.
Well, that's why I do things like that, because I know that kind of stuff can happen to anybody, So
if it can happen, it will happen. Murphy's Law, right?
Yes. And the other thing, like for the conversation to be as complete as possible, if you turn a DI tank on its side and run the water, basically the water is going to, what we call channel, right? The water is going to come in, go to the bottom because of gravity, go along the bottom because of gravity, fill up, and then go out through the center pipe, the riser. So if you are operating a tank where the DI is on its side, you can turn it around and use the other side, right?
But you have to check it.
Basically,
you have to check it immediately to see that it hasn't changed, that it has changed or not. Yeah,
yes,
you have to check it.
Yes. These are only workarounds when you're on site and you want to finish a job. So these are the workarounds. Watch out for channeling. And just talking about channeling, don't overfill a DI tank. Don't pack it to the top, right? Because actually you need to randomize the water in order for the water to go random through the DI resin. So there should always be a gap at the top. The water comes in and it mixes in the top as water, and then it goes down. Whereas if you touch the resin to the inlet, it will just go down.
I remember I did a few videos a year or two years ago about filling the adding the resin that you should leave like maybe 2/3 should be resin and the rest should be air?
A little bit more than 2/3.
A little bit more.
You're normally leaving like an inch at the top.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, because it'll also compact.
Maybe
right?
90% of the bag.
90%.
Okay.
10% open at the top. Yeah.
Because we have the bags in all the dual DI, the single DI, and the mini DI. I remember.
Yeah. So that's what you do if you don't have spare resin. That's why we make our resin in the bags for the dual DI tanks, so that it's easy, and then they're zip-locked, so then it's easy to carry spare resin. So if you do have TDS creep is pretty much the best definition for it, and these workarounds don't work, then you take the resin out, put the resin in, a little bit like the younger system. It's not as click, button, press, but it's not as expensive either. So it depends on, convenience versus money, in my opinion. So that's it. That's all we've got to say.
Right.
Great. See you in the next workshop.